Usually when I go on I-24, we've played it sometimes. In fact, if you haven't watched it, you can either go back in the post-game archive, or I think we clipped it as Michael Brooks debates a Mayo brain.
Who came up with that title?
Nation of Islam Obama. Like literally.
Okay.
I said that in character, and then I was
okay.
like, you know what, that works.
Gotcha.
So, fucking Mayo brain.
Didn't know if we wanted to shout out Forrest, but gotcha.
No, I think that was literally Nation of Islam Obama, which is basically my deep subconscious. And so, but usually when I go on I-24, it's like, Michael, you're going to be talking about whether or not Trump is a criminal, and you're going to be talking with, Jack Bickle, who's a ham wave radio operator who really likes Trump, and the Bible, and But this debate on Ilhan Omar, I was up against. Well, let me just put it this way: I was up against the guy with an accent, which is, as I point out in the clip, a huge disadvantage. But let's play a couple minutes of it. We'll stop, and everybody can stop with their feed. I know Grisham had some feedback on this, but this is actually legit. You might learn from this if you're dealing with people who are smearing Ilhan Omar.
Joining us now is Michael Brooks, host of The Michael Brooks Show and co-host of The Majority Report, and David Efune, editor-in-chief of The Allgemeiner. David, this was a victory you would acknowledge for progressives and perhaps something of a setback for staunch supporters of Israel.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. But, problematic in a number of ways. And I think perhaps what it was the first sign of is what Bret Stephens called today the Corbynization of the Democratic Party.
Pause it.
This is something that...
At this point, I'm already like, fuck you.
Bret Stephens.
Bret Stephens, automatic. I honestly was on the border of Bret Stephens in the debate. Okay.
The Democratic Party has got to be very careful about, where the radical extremes, fringes of the party start to move towards the center and the mainstream and take control over some of what the party stands for. This is not the historic nature of what the Democratic Party stands for, and I think it's a great shame and tragedy that somebody like Ilhan Omar, who is an overt anti-Semite, can hold the Democratic Party by the kahunas, as they say.
Michael?
Well, I just want to note, first of all, you're always at a bit of a disadvantage.
Maybe we should rewind it a little bit, because everybody, he mispronounced it, but I'm assuming people laugh. I didn't even realize how dismissive I was in my body language there. It's actually kind of funny.
Party by the kahunas, as they say.
Michael?
Well, I just want to note, first of all, you're always at a bit of a disadvantage when you're up against an accent. So I just want to have that noted in the playing field. But let's be real here. I mean, there was one group that wasn't included in that resolution, and that was the Palestinians as a people, where regular racism and dehumanization towards them is entirely accepted. The reality is that Ilhan Omar is correct on the merits. She's correct on the policy. Saying that she said this comment about dual allegiance is a great leap to begin with. And I have to say, I find it extraordinary that people on the right, who sometimes accurately, by the way, not always, but sometimes accurately, say people on the left, jump to accusations too quickly of various bigotries and read into things. They've been reading into every single thing that the Congresswoman has said from the beginning, most of which are substantive critiques of a sovereign nation state that happens to administer a horrific regime that violates people's rights on a daily basis in Gaza, the West Bank, and even inside Israel in some respects. The new indictment about Netanyahu isn't just garden variety corruption. It involves actually undermining democracy. So I support Ilhan Omar. I don't buy, and I also, in fact, support Corbyn, in fact. And the reality is that these things are going to become debated on the merits. And we're not going to have a false equivalency and actually drag down the profoundly serious issue of anti-Semitism by equating it with all criticism of a sovereign nation state that administers apartheid in reality.
Look, I think this is...
I forgot to say, as a Jew.
So that's true, but I'm tired of playing that game. Like, no, I know you are, but I mean, like, I do have a critique of identity politics, frankly. And I do think that part of my real allergy does go back to conversations about Israel, where just identity and standpoint epistemology superseded everything else. And we can all walk and chew gum at the same time. If you're not indulging in anti-Semitism, and it's pretty obvious when people are, frankly, you should be able to have an opinion and a robust critique of Israel. And you know, this actually, and in my mind, it applies to plenty of other categories, right? Like, no one is going to say like, oh, you're anti-Muslim if you can, you know, critique the record of Saudi Arabia or the Iranian government. It's ridiculous. Now, you can tell here, he's a little bit thrown because I think he's very much used to debating a kind of typical Democrat who would say like, well, this is a complicated issue. And he's thrown, you know, and I joke about the accent, but there's a lot of like fake authority in that accent. And he speaks very confidently and he's super articulate. But watch how not necessarily calm he stays after I say all that.
Almost, it's quite astounding to hear somebody sit here and speak like this. I mean,
Speaking
you know,
well, you mean?
a recent poll came out that only 24% of British people do not consider Corbyn to be an anti-Semite.
Well, you guys have done an effective job, but let's focus on Omar. You've done a great
you know what,
job
let's
of
focus.
smearing
You know
Corbyn.
what, let's
You're not going to do this to Congresswoman Omar.
You know what,
focus on her.
Omar.
Don't worry.
Let's do that.
Let me try to do that. Let's try to do this, and let me set this up. Let's focus on Omar.
Because this is important. This is
It
really
is important. And one of the issues, David, that she has argued is, and look, we can agree that maybe she was sloppy, maybe she got too close to an anti-Semitic trope, but as far as the actual policy is concerned, you mentioned a minute ago that the Democrats are engaged in something radical. Is it radical to criticize the Netanyahu government in Israel for the settlement policy in the West Bank?
Let's be clear about something, okay? And this is what's incredibly disingenuous about what you've just heard here. That is absolutely not what she is being accused of by people on the right and by members of her own party, the leadership of her own party. She is somebody who has accused Israel of hypnotizing the world.
That
has
was
accused
a 2012
supporters, has
tweet,
accused
which
supporters.
she's already backtracked
Excuse
on.
me, I let you
All right,
speak.
don't touch me.
Let me finish, please.
Sure.
Excuse me. She has accused supporters of the Jewish state of being motivated by money. And she has
Every
accused,
lobby plays a role in politics. That's reality.
The largest pro-Israel Jewish organization.
Right, and the House
That's
passed a
reality.
resolution condemning her for that. But again, to my question, is it radical to criticize the Netanyahu government for their settlement policy in the West Bank?
That's not what this discussion is about.
That's absolutely what this
is
discussion
it radical?
is about.
It's not.
This
it's not
discussion is
radical.
about the role
but that
of
is
lobbies.
not what this discussion is about. That's not what Ilhan Omar is
about
being
the
accused
power of
That's
lobbies.
not what she's being criticized
This discussion
before.
is about money in politics. This discussion is about foreign policy in the Middle East. Also, Ilhan Omar has been a robust critic of Saudi Arabia. She said people should boycott the Hajj because of Saudi Arabia's conduct. The reality is that the old stagnant frames of both the sort of Saudi and Israeli consensus is being undermined and disrupted and critiqued in a robust way, which is oriented on global human rights standards and not, in fact, ethnocentric identity politics, which is a problem wherever it manifests. And the smearing of her, the lies about her, the disgusting, grotesque display against her you just saw is only going to strengthen people's commitment.
I didn't realize I did this, but it's visually kind of funny. Just go back just like a few seconds. Well, this is another thing, too, is don't worry about looking polite. You know, I mean, I think you got to hold your tone and have a certain niceness about you, but like, look, he's saying bullshit. Interrupt. Ethnocentric identity politics, which is a problem wherever it manifests. And the smearing of her, the lies about her, the disgusting, grotesque display against her you just saw is only going to strengthen people's commitment.
But can you understand why a lot of people who support Israel, they may criticize the Netanyahu government, feel that Israel constantly gets singled out by people on the Democratic left in a way that is unfair compared to the rest of the world?
So in terms of reality, let's break this down. Number one, there is, first of all, if Israel wants to be held to a higher standard than a place like Saudi Arabia, it's going to be held to a higher standard. When people say, well, why don't you complain about the Saudis? First of all, everybody does, and the Saudis at least don't have any pretensions that they're anything other than a brutal theocracy and monarchy. The Israelis have maintained a position of being the only democracy in the Middle East, while they have maintained an occupation of another group of people for over 40 years and regularly killed and bombed civilians. And the second standard is that, look, again, in terms of reality, Israel has not only serious and profound and systemic problems, which even poses a threat in some respects to our security, but like Egypt, we happen to fund them greatly. And so therefore, it is a different relationship. But you will find that those who criticize Israel in good faith, as many Jewish activists do, of course, are going to be actually the same people, as you see with Omar, who are questioning the relationship with the Gulf monarchies and other areas of dysfunction in Middle East policy. That will never be wrong, no matter how many lies and smears people throw at her.
David?
You know, we can have a long discussion about Middle East policy.
Pause it.
But what you...
This is where he's lost it. This is where he's lost it. And I'm not, and again, I'm really just like, I'll try to find one where I fucked up, because this isn't like, it's fun, whatever. But this is it. If you're in this engagement with somebody and somebody else is watching, the constant goalpost shifting, and he's still trying to use that tone of like, I've got this under control here, but he's done.
How many lies and smears people throw at her.
David?
You know, we can have a long discussion about Middle East policy, but what you have seen tonight is disingenuity at the highest level.
I agree.
This is not what this discussion is about. This is not
about
being accused
policy.
of. Please don't interrupt. I let you
about
speak.
policy.
I let you speak. Please don't interrupt.
And focus on policy.
Please don't interrupt.
Focus on
This
policy.
is about a person who has come into the United States Congress and repeated, as a repeat offender, bigoted tropes against the Jewish community. She's been called out from it across the board, from within the Jewish community, from within her own party. And
But David,
the concern
the
is...
people who agree with you, and look, there are plenty of people who do agree with you, and may say that, you know, what she did was unconscionable, but by playing it out the way it did, by hitting back so hard at Ilhan Omar, who doesn't seem like any sort of threat to Israel or people who support Israel, the Israeli right has essentially lifted her stature. She has more power now than she did a week ago.
But also,
But
let's
again,
be clear,
this is
most
not
people
about the
don't
Israeli
agree
right,
with her.
right? The criticism here is coming from across the political spectrum, and it's a very specific criticism. This is not criticism about discussion of Israel. It's criticism about repeating anti-Semitic tropes.
And it's
that's the charge of dual loyalty. That's the charge of being influenced by
which we don't
money,
accept that premise.
right? And that's the charge of Israel hypnotizing the world.
And every single
These are the kind of
person-
tropes that you saw in
Every
Nazi
single
propaganda.
person is
This was definitely rude, but I saw the 1 minute warning, and I never leave these things without getting the last word.
Hypnotizing the world.
And every single
These are the kind of
person-
tropes that you saw in
every
Nazi
single
propaganda.
person is influenced by money from every single lobby. There's no
gotta leave it
magical
there.
exemption with AIPAC, and she's right.
Michael Brooks and David Effian, good to have you both on. Terrific discussion. We appreciate
Yes.
That was pretty fun. That was like a buildup of years of arguments I've had over dinner tables about this. Finally getting personified in one. What is that? Was that you think it was Australian or South African? I don't know. It helped that Schuster was fair.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Yes.
You did a good job keeping him focused, though. Like, particularly when you took almost the role of the moderator of going after him, being like, don't make this about Corbyn, stay on, Omar. Was suddenly you as a guest were helping the interviewer, moderator person keep it on focus, and he suddenly then reinforced your point a few times. Like, that is smart.
Right. Well, because that's the play. They're gonna bring all this other bullshit in, and then, but even there again, like the painful thing about cable TV is like obviously there's a much more interesting, broader conversation you have about Corbyn, but like the main takeaway in that is like, no, I'm not leaving my boy hanging. So I've got to also say, while I'm not going to get distracted by that, I still back him.
Well, it also makes him make a decision, like, is he going to follow up on the Corbyn comment?
Well,
or...
you notice what he did is he said only 23% of Britons think he's not an anti-Semite. And I said, right, because you did a great job smearing him, and we're not going to allow that to happen again. And then as Ben Burgess, who told me after he watched the debate, he said, a poll number is not an argument. Classical Burgess. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS. or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.